Hello, I'm glad you're here. Today we will be reading from two texts. The first text we will read together is Colonial Voices, Hear Them Speak, and we will be doing a rereading of The Blacksmith Slave. As I read, I want you to think about the questions and maybe vocabulary words that you have as I go through the text. The Blacksmith Slave. I was seized in Africa, thrown on a ship, shaken, beaten, branded. When we landed, the captain sold me to the highest bidder. My master is a blacksmith. We make axes, irons, hinges, hooks, padlocks, pokers, latches, and nails, thousands of nails. I fill the forge, pull the bellows, and stir the coals. The master is old. He needs my muscle. I heat the iron, lift it from the forge. My master strikes and shapes it on the anvil. Men sit in his shop and talk of tea, taxes, liberty, and freedom. Freedom for them, not for me. I am a slave. I will always be bound. What do you know from the reading of this page? You might be thinking independence from Britain won't change anything for him, since it won't give him his freedom. You also might be wondering, what does the word seized mean? I was seized in Africa. Yeah, he was taken by force. What does this page tell us about enslaved people? Exactly. Enslaved people were taken by force, and someone owned them. Someone else who makes him work. From what we have read so far, how do you think the blacksmith slave's freedom is different from the freedom the men who sit in the shop and talk about tea, taxes, liberty, and freedom? The freedom the men are talking about is freedom from Britain, while the freedom from the blacksmith slave, he wants personal freedom, not to be owned by anyone else. Have you wondered if he's a patriot or a loyalist? You're correct. He doesn't seem to be either, although he doesn't think that freedom from Britain will solve his problems. I want to remind you that this is just one African American's perspective and not representative of all African American people at that time. I also want to remind you that the American Revolution, there were patriots and loyalists, and there were also those in between who didn't have strong beliefs either way. Now that we have read Colonial Voices, Hear Them Speak, The Blacksmith Slave, I would like to bring our attention to our next text, An Incomplete Revolution. This text, we are going to focus on reading for gist. Don't worry, we aren't going to go all the way through the document today. However, in the future, you may be asked to work with a partner and come up with the gist for the other sections of this text. I would like us to start by reading the first paragraph. Sometimes when I am reading, I like to color code my paragraphs so I can focus on chunks. Focusing on a chunk at a time will allow me to build a deeper understanding of what the text is mostly about. Let's begin. Thousands of African Americans, both slave and free, fought in the American Revolution. Many slaves hoped the war would bring about their emancipation, but their struggle for freedom had just begun. I'm going to highlight this word because I want to come back to it later. That seems like a word a secret agent word collector might want to look up. But I also know at that time slaves wanted freedom. They wanted emancipation. So I'm wondering if those two words are related. As I've read this chunk, I want to think about what is the gist? What is this section mostly about? I also want to put the gist in my own words. Go ahead and pause the video and take a chance. Take the risk. Write your own gist and then press play and see if your gist is close to my gist. My gist says thousands of African Americans fought in the American Revolution hoping for freedom. Was your gist close in the same meaning as my gist? Let's continue to practice. Now I will read the next paragraph in orange. March 5th, 1770 began like any other day in Boston, Massachusetts. Outside the city's custom house, British soldiers stood guard, as they had for 2 years. Many colonists hated the soldiers, who were a reminder that they had to obey British law. Remember, pause the video, write your own gist, and then press play and check to see if your gist and my gist are similar. My gist, March 5th, 1770, the Boston, Massachusetts soldiers stood guard, as they had for 2 years. Is your gist close to my gist? Now I'm going to read the next section in yellow. On that day, Crispus Attucks, a tall, near giant of a man, joined a crowd gathering at the custom house. A young boy was shouting rude remarks at a British soldier. Suddenly, the soldier lost his temper and struck the boy with the butt of his gun. There are a couple words in this passage that I want to highlight just because I want to come back to them. A near giant of a man. I think that means that he was just really, really tall. Also, when it says that he was hit with the butt of a gun, I'm thinking that that is the rear of the gun, maybe the back part. Go ahead and pause and write your gist. What is this section mostly about? Then press play and compare your gist to my gist. My gist says, Crispus Attucks was at Custom House, and a young boy was shouting rude comments. The boy was hit with the back of a gun. I also want to add here rude comments at soldiers. What kind of soldiers? British soldiers. Sometimes when we write our gist, we might realize that there are places that we need to fix and change. So feel free to revise your gist at any time. I'm going to read the next paragraph in green. The scene soon got out of hand. More colonists armed with sticks and clubs joined the mob. Frightened British soldiers fired into the crowd. When it was over, Attucks and 4 other Americans lay dead or dying. Go ahead and pause the video and write your gist for this part of the text. Go ahead and compare your gist to mine. The situation got out of hand and soldiers shot into the crowd. 4 Americans were injured, dead, or dying. Now I'm going to read the last paragraph in blue. The skirmish, known as the Boston Massacre, was one of several incidents that led to the American Revolution, 1775 to 1783. Crispus Attucks, an escaped enslaved person, was the first of many African Americans to die in the long struggle for American independence. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this word because that word is bold and I know it's going to be important, but it also says the skirmish, known as the Boston Massacre. So the skirmish was the Boston Massacre. I'm thinking that word might be connected to the situation. Go ahead and pause the video and write your gist. Here's my gist. Crispus Attucks was the first African American enslaved person to die in the American Revolution. I'm going to revise my gist and add the word escaped because that was used in the passage. And I think it's important to know that he was an escaped enslaved person. So he was no longer enslaved. Together, we have read the first section of An Incomplete Revolution. At a later time, or maybe today, your teacher will have you read the rest of An Incomplete Revolution with a partner and write the gist on the right-hand side. Remember, it's really important to go ahead and take the risk to write your own gist and then compare your thinking to someone else's and see if you can come up with your own words. What is this text mostly about? Let's review today's learning targets. I can determine the gist of an incomplete revolution. I can determine the meaning of unfamiliar words and phrases in an incomplete revolution. Some of you may be wondering the meaning of some of the words that we've highlighted. You may have other words that you highlighted. Remember, as secret agent word collectors, you can go to the Word Central website and look up the meaning of any words, as well as using clues from the text before or after the word, and ask yourself, what's this word most likely mean? Good luck, readers, and I'll see you next time.